Well, thanks for watching. Your views and comments make this Pilsner interview entirely possible. And if you found value in any of our videos, please help me with a like, a comment. This fuels our growth, our clout, and helps us attract even more amazing guests like Jens Eiken and Christian Andersen. Boy, it's so great to see you guys. We've had a good time talking this morning. And I want to know how things are in Denmark on this spring day.
Well, in my part of Denmark, it's sunny and spring-like, actually. Lots of birds singing out there.
Still winter here, dark and gloomy, bad weather. That's kind of how I like it.
Well, it's pretty decent. I'm in South Carolina and it's trying to rain a little bit, but it is very spring-like. So Jens, it sounds like our weather is similar. But for our audience, now that they know you're in Denmark, I want to share a little bit more about you two, because this is quite an illustrious panel we have today. So Jens Eiken is a globally recognized master brewer with an extensive experience at leading breweries like Carlsberg, Molson Coors, and is renowned for his expertise, especially in brewing science and recipe development. Christian Andersen is a celebrated beer writer and consultant, known for his insightful storytelling in the beer industry and author of the Danish Beer Revolution. And together they've released a new book on Pilsners entitled The Naked Beer, the book about Pilsners. Now, I am really looking forward to this, and let's dive right into this, because I know it must have been fascinating writing a book about the history and influence of Pilsner. So, Christian, I want to start with you. And Jens, we're going to come back to you in just a minute. We're not ignoring you, but I want to get that master brewer's perspective. But let's start out with these first ones with Christian. So, Christian, share with us the pivotal moment in history that led up to the creation of Pilsner beer and its transformative impact on the brewing industry worldwide. And if you don't mind, I've got a Pilsner Urquell I'm going to open up while I listen to your answer.
That was a good choice. I will point out 4 pivotal moments in the history of Pilsner brewing. The one is back to 1553, when the Duke Albrecht of Bavaria made it illegal to brew beer in the summertime from April to September, and that rule was in 300 years in Bavaria. Because of that rule, the art of brewing Pilsner, the art of brewing lager beer was made. I think you cannot underestimate these 300 years when it was forbidden to brew beer in Bavaria. The next thing I will point out, cheers to you, Doc, in quite a not unbeery drink here. Water for me. The next thing I will point out is espionage, industrial espionage. 2 of the great figures in world brewing, Anton Dreher from Vienna and Gabriel Sedlmayr from Munich, from the Spaten Brauerei in Munich. They went to Great Britain to explore their capacities for making light malt. That was very difficult at that time in the beginning of the 1800s. They came back to Austria and Bavaria with a knowledge that created the groundworks for the fine Pilsner. In 1800, the third thing I want to emphasize is in 1841, the year before 1842, which I will return to in a few seconds, Anton Dreher, in his Zwichacht Brauerei in Vienna, he made the first Vienna lager in the world. And that kind of beer type, that beer style, is quite close to the Pilsner beer. It is, in fact, close to the Pilsner Urquell, which you are drinking, my friends, which was made in 1842 in Pilsen in the Czech Republic. That was the four pivotal moments I will point out. I can point many moments out.
Maybe I could add one thing, if that's possible.
Please.
To actually say that I think I talked to the research university in Prague, and I asked, okay, at what time on the 11th of November 1842 was the Pilsner launched? So Pilsner Urquell as such. And we agreed that it must have been at 8 o'clock in the evening.
Well, that begs the question, why was it released at 8 o'clock? I'll buy it.
Yeah, well, there must have been, you can say they needed to eat a little bit first, and then there was the revolution coming. Mr. Joseph Kröll was opening the keg, and out flew the Pilsner.
Okay. Well, so what makes it 8 o'clock, Jens?
Well, that's the evening. I think that was nice. Instead of, I mean, you could also be in 6, but we thought 8 o'clock might be a good one.
8 o'clock. Okay. So what is
it didn't say anywhere else.
The day, date, and now time.
Yeah, that's our thinking. I mean, I can just go into the book. It's about 380 pages, and on page 175. We say here there's a time before the 11th of November 1842 and a time after the 11th of November 1842. And well, we have to have a time. So I would say 8 o'clock p.m. That was when it was released to the public, and everybody in the world, or especially in Czech Republic, were smiling.
So that's after Pilsner. We have before Pilsner and after Pilsner in the world.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, the next thing I wanted to find out a little bit about, Christian, and if you don't mind answering this one for me, brewing a new beer, particularly when the world was enjoying primarily dark beers, all of which were, I think, in like ceramic mugs versus this nice, pretty clear glass that I have here. What were the challenges and conflicts that were faced by the Pilsner beer as it rose in prominence? And how did it eventually triumph over traditional, I guess, dark beers in ceramic mugs?
I think beauty before ugliness. It was a very, very, very beautiful beer compared to the dark ones, as you mentioned. And I actually think it was a lot tastier too. That's two simple questions, I know, but it was enough to conquer the world. It took a while. It took 50 years, more than 50 years to conquer the world, because the big challenges was in water quality, on water softness and hardness. It was also in the yeast, in controlling the yeast. And you have to go to 1883 to the Carlsberg laboratory, where Emil Christian Hansen, he isolated the first time yeast isolation. So that was also a big challenge. Yeah, that's a short answer.
And Hans Christian Andersen, any relation?
I have lots of good stories for you, Doc, and for other beer lovers in the world, but no, not related. And he hadn't many siblings, as far as I know. But
well,
yes,
I had
my
to
name
ask.
is
Christian
Andersen. You had to ask, I know. And it's the first time I got that question.
So bottom line, it was just beautiful and delicious. That's really how it got over. And
I actually think it had such an energy. It has such an energy and such a persuasive umami wellness to it that it knocked people over. It was, in fact, a beer sensation, not only in Pilsen, in in Czech Republic, but it soon spread to all over the world. Not the least Bavaria. They were envious. They tried every single way how to duplicate it or replicate it. What do you say? But they failed. Only 40 years later, they made a copy of it, or a light lager that they could boast about. And that was the Spark.
40 years. That's kind of a lifetime in beer years.
Yeah. Yes, it is.
Wow. Okay.
The first Danish Pilsner was Tuborg Pilsner in 1883. So it took a while.
No, I'm just saying it's probably more or less the age of us, 40 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a long time in beer years. I mean, the Germans are clever people. I would have thought they'd have copied that a little quicker than that.
Yeah, but they didn't. And the history of beer, it's kind of dark period, not described very well. But it took many years. But when it rolled on, it to go all over the world. 90% of all beer drinkers today, they drink light lagers.
Well, let's
Not
speak of that.
Pilsners,
So this was a global phenomenon. I mean, it's just, I think, hard to conceive, especially that long ago, that it could spread globally, but it really did. And in what ways did that global spread inspire innovation and creativity among brewers worldwide? I mean, part of it must have been, it took 40 years for the Germans to figure out how to copy it. Did that foster kind of a, let's all do a collab?
There's a myth about the Pilsner that it is not very different from each other. It is very different, Pilsner style to Pilsner style. In our book, we describe among 20 different Pilsner styles. And I guess if Jens and I wrote another book, it would be 30 different Pilsner styles. In the eastern part of the world, they use rice as a prominent ingredient. In the United States, they use corn, for instance. And Jens could mention several other places they use other ingredients. They are very, very different from each other. Also, the industry pilsners are very, very different from each other. Let me give you a good example. A person called Delvaux, he was a yeast professor. He was at the Stella Artois. He said he was there for 17 years. And he said when he came there, the international bitter units, the IBUs, were around 40. When he left, they were around 17. So lots of differences, lots of progression in how to make pilsners from brewery to brewery.
So it almost sounds like, in summary, it was a beautiful beer that consumers really enjoyed, brewers really enjoyed it, and it forced them to brew at a new level that they had never brewed at before. Is that fair? Jens, I'd like you especially to comment after Christian does, as a master brewer.
Yes. The art of brewing Pilsner is the most difficult art of brewing beer. That was a common answer when I asked brewmasters around the world, especially in Oregon, the Czech Republic, and Bavaria, the three places where they brew world-class Pilsners. They say at the end of the day, the brewmasters say they would have a Pilsner. And also a Pilsner, when I come to a brewery, I often ask for a Pilsner. Of course, because I like Pilsner, but because it is a fingerprint, a blueprint of the quality of this brewery. And that was the common answer for the brewmasters. The very best brewmasters only become best brewmasters if they make a Pilsner perfectly.
and you can also say lately, when the craft beer revolution started, and of course it started different places around the world. But I would say that it started probably with IPAs and all the other styles, except for a Pilsner. And I would say that when all the craft brewers learned or were being taught how to actually brew, then they started to brew a Pilsner. And I would say, as Christian is saying, that's it's like a pizza margherita. I mean, it's like you have to be able to control, you have to be able to understand the raw material and the impact on the final flavor and taste. So that's really important, and that's also what we have seen around. And as Christian is saying, when I go to a pub or restaurant, I always start asking for a Pilsner. Say, okay, so is the brewer today able to brew a nice beer? Then I start with a Pilsner, and if the Pilsner is perfect, then I go on to the next style, IPA, Bock, Helles, wheat beer, whatever.
Well, I think that really takes us into the next question, because we've talked about that consumers thought it was beautiful and they loved the taste and the characteristics. Brewers were challenged. It sounds like it's the Mount Everest of brewing, and every brewer wants to brew a really great Pilsner. So with this challenge, did that influence brewers in other countries to talk and schools to work on and teach? Was there a level of, I guess, collaboration that it inspired worldwide?
I came again to think about Emil Christian Hansen at the Carlsberg. I'm not a Carlsberg man, but I know the beer history. And Emil Christian Hansen, 1883, is a very pivotal person in brewing history. He thought that the Carlsberg should hold the yeast to themselves, not giving it free for all brewers in the world. It was one of the biggest moments in beer history, this isolation of the yeast. But the owner of Carlsberg, Jacobsen, he said to Emil Christian Hansen, let's give it free. So that was quite a good thing, wasn't it? So let's give it free to the whole world to make good beer.
Jens, I've got to get your takes, because you have been a Carlsberg man. I don't know if you still are or not, but what's your take on that, on the Pilsner, inspiring, I guess, collaboration and interest in working beyond our own regional areas?
As you say, I think that we are all inspired by each other. You can say in the past we had the light lagers, we had the international pilsners, and then suddenly we inspired each other, both the craft and the lager brewery, or the industrial or the international pilsner breweries. We inspired each other to actually make new innovations. So I think that without this ignition or innovation, I think we're not come to where we are today. So I think that's when master brewers or brewers talk to each other, there are new ideas coming, and that is pivotal in this industry as well. As Christian was saying, that okay, what if IC Jacobsen didn't release the way to purify the yeast? Where have we been? It would probably have taken another 40 years, as we mentioned before everybody was able to produce this purity and clean Pilsner. So I think that was an amazing step by Carlsberg at that time.
Wow. Well, the next question's for you. I've got to get your take on this, Jens. So as a master brewer, how would you summarize the impact that Pilsners have had on the brewing world?
I think that when I look at the raw materials, the impact is like that is really understanding of what raw materials are, and I think that's what we are really good at the bigger breweries. We understand the malt, we understand the barley quality, we understand the corn quality, we understand the rice quality and the sorghum and the cassava quality, what the impact is on the final flavor, the final taste of a pilsner or a beer as such, but also the water, the hops, the hop varieties, and of course the yeast, which is very important. But I think that all these things coming together, sharing what we knew to the wider, you can say, brewing amount of brewing people, I think that was really critical. And I think that today the craft beer industry inspire things back to the bigger community, to the international brewers. We learn from each other today. Without the craft brewers, we have not been where we are today.
So it sounds like, in summary, and I'd love to get your take on this. Essentially, it was an appealing beer visually when it first came out. It was appealing flavor and taste wise. And I think probably because it was clear and glassware was coming out at the time, people could see it and perceive maybe a purity that wasn't there. But then for brewers, they had to really go back and do their homework in order to brew one. So it kind of brought up the whole world's quality of beer. Is that fair?
I think that's true, and you can say with regards to maturation, which is a lot to do with lager, so lagering or maturation of beer, where you had to wait for a long time before all the proteins and polyphenols and yeast precipitated to make the beer clear. I think that moment when that happened, you said, "Aha! That is amazing. Let's do more of these." And then, of course, you had filtration techniques and separation techniques and all these later on. But I think that was a eureka moment at that time.
You know, it almost sounds like when the United States landed on the moon, which started the space program, the Pilsner beer on what was the date? November 11th at the time? That this was the equivalent of landing a man on the moon.
Exactly.
Wow. Well, I can't wait. I have not read the book yet. Now, you just got it out in English, what, a few months ago?
Yeah. It was launched by a company or publisher called Austin Macaulay. And it came out on the 7th of December, actually. And later on launched in different countries in the world. Yes.
So how can I and others get a copy?
I mean, there's you can say you can go straight to Austin Macaulay. You can go to Amazon. You can go to the different bookshops, book shops. Sorry, in the different countries. But I think that Amazon will probably be one to go for, which is the easiest one.
All right. Well, now we're not wrapping up for those of you in the audience, because my favorite part's the rapid fire questions. And these are questions that you've asked. And so we're going to ask these guys. So Christian, we're going to start with you on the rapid fire questions. So I'd love to know, and I don't think you started out loving Pilsners from what I've heard, but when somebody comes to you and they say, you know, I'm not crazy about Pilsners. They seem overrated. They're just bland and they're too light. How do you answer them?
Yes, I will answer yes. And they will be even more bland in the future when they come from the industry brewers, because they cut the corners always. But there's a rising revolution. There's a revolution, a Pilsner revolution out there, and expect wonderful Pilsners from new craft brewers around the world.
All right. So buy fresh and local, I think is what I'm hearing.
Fresh and local, of course. Fresh and local. Fresh is important, very important. Also local.
So support your local brewery if you want a good Pilsner.
Yep.
So, so the next question that I've got, Jens, you're up on this one. I'm saving the extra tough ones for you, buddy.
I'm sad.
What's the difference between Czech and German Pilsners? And we heard it took 40 years for the Germans to approach that. So what's the real difference? And I'm actually I've got a bit, ooh, that's noisy. I've got a Bitburger here and I'm going to pour.
You'll open that one. I think that Bitburger is one of the very nice Pilsners in Germany, actually.
Yeah.
But I would say it depends on where you are in Germany. And if you just cut the corners, as Christian said, just to mention, I do not really believe in what Christian said before. I don't think that's really right, but I had to say that. But when you go to Czech, then there might be some diacetyl, so butterscotch in the beer. When you go to Germany, there might be, which is a no-go in Germany, the diacetyl, there might be a little bit more sulfur in the aroma in German Pilsners. So that's, I would say, the main difference. It looks nice, dog, actually. But you have, of course, you can see the color as well. If you take a real Czech Pilsner, they have an EU patent on that one. So you have, for instance, one is that you have to boil during the wet boiling step into the brew house. You have to boil for at least 2 hours, which means that the wort or the beer will be a little bit darker. And you don't see that in German breweries. That is short boiling, light, and very clear and light beers.
Yeah, it's I'll switch cameras. I'll try and switch cameras. There we go. So you can see the difference in color. It certainly got a lot more of a warmer caramel color in the Pilsner Urquell versus the Bitburger.
Exactly.
It's also decocted. Is it 4 times decocted? The Urquell?
Well, there's different techniques of producing, you can say, Pilsners, but of course, in Czech Republic, decoction technique, so then is used. In Germany, it's mostly infusion. That you can read much more about that in the book as well. But I think there is different ways of doing Pilsners, and that's what you also can see in the glass.
Well, I've got to ask that. I didn't plan on this, but we'll call it a quick question, or a rapid fire question. So when it comes to Pilsners, good, as Christian pointed out, craft beer, really well done Pilsners. Can you do that with infusion mash, or do you have to go decoction mash?
Yes, you can do it with infusion. The Truma Pils in Obersalzburg in Austria is one of the best Pilsners I've ever tasted. It's won numerous medals at European Beer Star, World Beer Cup. It is with open fermentation, but only infusion. Yeah, wonderful Pilsner.
I mean, you can make, if I can mention Charlie Bamford, just 1 second, he is not into decoction at all. And he always mentioned infusion only. I would say that it depends on the flavor you want to you have, or of your Pilsner or your lager. That's for sure. So if you want a darker hue or color, of course, you need to consider either wet boiling for a longer time or decoction mashing. There are disadvantages and advantages of doing that.
But the summary would be that regardless of the mashing technique, infusion or decoction, a excellent quality Pilsner can be produced with either one of them with a master brewer that knows what he's doing. Okay.
Yes.
Decoction is not essential. Well, cool. All right. So I'm not sure I really heard a short answer, though, on your, Jens, on the difference between a Czech Pilsner and a German Pilsner. How would you contrast these two beers that I'm holding up?
I mean, one is the flavor, number two is the color, number three might be the head retention. But if you make it a very nice Pilsner, you will get a very nice foam or head on the beer. And then you can see the difference in the color and the flavor. So if I take Czech, maybe a little bit of butterscotch. If I take German, maybe a little bit of sulfur.
And possibly a difference in hop flavor?
Yes. I mean, if you take a true Czech Pilsner, it's normally a Czech variant of hops. So it could be Saaz. Just to mention one, in Germany, it might be Mittelfrüh, Tettnang, and so forth. So, of course, if you want to make a local terroir, as you say, use the local hops from your area. So in Germany, you will not see, if you make a true German Pils, you will not use Saaz hops.
Okay. Perfect. That's what I was looking for. All right. You got the next one, Jens. So I've actually never been to the Czech Republic, but that's on my bucket list. But I have talked to the brewer emeritus, and one of the things he talked about extensively was the medieval tunnels. Now, how did that factor into the Pilsner development?
Well, as you know, and I think we alluded to that, I mean, if you have lager yeast or use the bottom fermenting yeast, we normally use colder temperatures. That's one thing. And in the old days, you also had to have a clear beer. So you actually pumped. So if you look at the medieval tunnels in Czech Republic, that was necessary to store the beers cold for a long time, just as in other older breweries from 1800s and forward. I mean, 1842 and forward. You had to mature the beer for longer in cold vessels underground. So that's what it was used to get the proteins, polyphenols, and yeast to precipitate, and that took a long time. And then the beer was ready.
So do you think tunnels essentially, and I know it was a regional just luxury that they had there, but do you think the Pilsner would have never occurred had they not had tunnels under the town of Pilsen?
I mean, if you didn't have cold maturation, you would not have had the same flavor and aroma as you got from the Pilsner Urquell at that time. So that's for sure, because it was, you can say today, you also, in some areas of the world, you had to stop brewing because it was too hot. The fermentation was wild. Therefore, it was very fast, like with aged fermentation, then you get different flavors. So if you want subtle flavors, you have to actually get cold fermentation, and clear beer, you had to mature it until it was clear.
So the medieval tunnels were probably pretty essential.
Exactly. Just as, yes, and also when you saw in most breweries after the 1842 had lager tunnels underneath the breweries where you stored the beer for a long time. And that was with ice. So you actually brought the ice in from the lakes and actually put around the vessels to keep them cold. And you can't do that anymore because there's no ice.
So Jens, I know you're a judge at the World Beer Cup. You just recently, I think, came back from judging the World Beer Cup. How would you describe the taste and profile of a great Pilsner? Now, I know that's general, and Christian talked about some of the differences, and we've talked about just the difference between a German Pils and a Czech Pils. But when it comes to a Pils, and Christian said it, I know I've said it, you've said it, when you go to size up a brewery's beer, you might have a Pilsner first, And I think you used the words, if it's perfect, you might try the other beers. So what is that perfect Pilsner that's somewhat that works with the local terroir, but it's still a great Pilsner?
I can answer that quite short. I mean, as a master brewer, you actually always smell it first. So you actually smell it and say, okay, any off flavors. If there is an off flavor, if it smells cheesy, sour, of course that's a taste. If there's any malfunction or if it doesn't work, that's the first thing I'm actually looking for. And then you actually, in the World Beer Cup, you just say, well, not this time, try again.
Okay. How about
that's also
profile?
why we call it the naked beer. You can see the faults and you can see the faults. You can taste the faults, smell the faults.
You mentioned all flavors that would immediately kick it out.
Yeah.
But what are I mean, obviously, you're looking for it to be bright, and you mentioned the head. I didn't really hear you mention the malt profile, and even the hops could have a little difference from the terroir. So are there some other aspects? True.
I think when I have to do with a Pilsner, it of course, or lager, I mean, lager is a wide area, but if you zoom in on Pilsner, then I would say you start with saying, okay, maybe it's malt forward or it's hop forward. I mean, either there's a lot of hops in, so you have a hoppy Pilsner, or you have a malt forward Pilsner. So that's where I normally start there and say, okay, what are we having in the glass? And I say, okay, that's a malt forward Pilsner. So I start there and say, okay, which malt could it have been? That's difficult to actually tell. But then you can start there and say, okay, and then you take a sniff and say, oh, a little bit of grainy, maybe use a little bit more barley. It's a little bit more fruity, or the mouthfeel is a bit more rounded. Maybe there's a little bit of corn in there, or rice. It's more fresh, maybe. So you start there and say, okay, how can you build the perfect Pilsner? But I always start and say, yes, there should be some nice flavors in there. So it could be fruity, hoppy. It could be a little bit, when you're talking about bitterness, it shouldn't be astringent. It should be nice and rounded. There should be like a bitterness in a Pilsner. You should be able to taste that. If not, it's not a Pilsner. So there's some distinct quality you have to be able to show, I would say. So I like, for instance, some of the landrace varieties of hops. If you take the original Pilsner from Germany and Czech Republic, I mean, the Saaz, the Tettern, the Mittelfrüh, and so forth, they give you a lot of nice rounded bitterness, which is essential, I think, for a nice Pilsner. That's where I would start. If you need to have the hoppy Pilsner, then you can use some of the New World varieties, but please be careful, because they also, if you actually use too much of them, they will give you an astringent bitterness, which is not really for a Pilsner, I would say.
Well, that raises one quick question as a master brewer. So can a Pilsner have in it essentially, the North American hops, not all of them, but a lot of them have a citrus quality to them.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were to pick up, they had some extra Cascade hops, so they threw that in their Pilsner. Is that verboten?
No, not today. I mean, you can do whatever you like. And I mean, Cascade is a nice hop variety, also for Pilsner, actually. It gives you this little orangey, citrus-like flavor, which also suits. But it depends on what you want to produce. So I would say if you want to produce an original something, of course, you have to be careful about what you do. If you want to do a hobby Pils, you can do whatever you like. So you also see that in the US. I produce a German, I produce a Czech style. So you can see that on the label as well.
I think the two words, and as an engineer, I struggle with the right words, but I'm hearing drinkability and balance. that it is just
Yeah.
phenomenally drinkable. The balance is there. You talked about the roundness of the hop bitterness, but it still has a presence there. We talked about the brightness of the beer, the head, which is now disappeared on this one. But it sounds like it's just attractive overall. It's beautiful in appearance. It's drinkable. You can have more than one, and it just has a roundness about it that just invites you to have another one. Is that my attempt to pull it all together?
No, you say it very, very nicely, Doc.
Yeah,
I mean,
perfect.
perfect.
I don't know about perfect, but I was trying hard. So, Christian, we've got the last question for you, and I honestly don't know this one. So I'm very fortunate in the South Carolina, North Carolina. We have some great breweries. We have Sierra Nevada, which of course is not known for their lagers, but they've inspired a lot of brewers, and so there's a lot of brewers in the Asheville area. One of my favorites is called Burning Blush, and they're actually nearly across the street from Sierra Nevada. And he has these heads, and he can pour. He features lager beers, and he has one of the is it Luker heads, I think, and he can pour several different styles of pours, and he challenges me every time I go in there, but I can never pronounce the names of the beer pours. So could you pronounce? I think there's three different beer pours. How you pronounce their name, and how you would describe them, and maybe what your favorite is.
I cannot pronounce them, Doc, but I will try. The easiest one first. Šnyt. That's half foam and half beer. So then it's Hladinka. That's the one we all know. The normal pour with 3-4 centimeters of foam. The Czechs love foam. And the last one is called milk, translated to English, called Mlíko. I think it's Mlíko. And I asked one of my friends in the Czech Republic, and Doc, please go there as soon as you can. You won't regret it at all. I told him, this Mlíko, what is it? It's for the tourists, he said. It's only foam. So, yeah. But I was a tourist and I didn't drink it at all. Yeah, it's for the tourists. But the Czechs, they have a good technique. They call it a side pull. And the Czech brewing technique, the Czech brewing tradition is on the rise among the craft brewers, because the craft beer revolution, as we mentioned, is now mature to lager brewing, and not the least brewing light lagers, pilsners, and dark pilsners. And the Czechs, they have this side pulls. And in short, compared to the traditional pull, it pulls out foam first. First foam, and then beer, or what do you call it? It gives lots of numerous possibilities to make all these wonderful pours, touristy or not.
So if you go there and they suggest the Mlíko, they know you're a tourist.
Yeah. Yes,
Exactly.
I'm a tourist. Get out of there. Yeah.
Well, Christian, I will put you on the spot. I did it to Jens, and so I got to make this fair. I want you to bring it all home for us. You and Jens have written this fabulous, what I think nearly 400-page book on Pilsners. What is, when you bring that all together, and Pilsners seem on the rise now in their popularity, and people are beginning to appreciate them. There's an awful lot of people, particularly here in the USA, that just love IPAs. Sam Calagione was saying that pretty much 1 out of 2 beers is an IPA here in the United States. So as we wrap all this up, if people kind of think a Pilsner is the industrial beers, I think you mentioned that before, the big commercial ones, but that craft brewers are really doing a more excellent job at their Pilsners. How would you inspire someone that says, oh, I know Pilsners, I really like IPAs? How would you inspire them to say, you've not had a great Pilsner yet. You need to keep trying. Here's why.
That was one of the goals, the visions of the book. Inspiration. It was a public relation instrument for the fine art of Pilsner brewing. I took a look at the beer revolution and saw one IPA after another, and ended it all in juice. Today it's juice. I like juice, but I more like beer. So yeah, you can make a book. You can make like you do, Doc, a video or videos about good beer. Jens and I, we made a beer about Pilsner, and we are so lucky that it's now translated to English, bestseller in Denmark. So yeah, somebody must like Pilsner.
Many of the brewers we have spoken to in the course of working on the naked beer claim that Pilsner is the foundation of the art of brewing beer. Only when you possess the art of crafting a good Pilsner can you progress to the many other types of beer. I think that's some of the, you can say that's a good statement of, you can say, this revolution.
So what would you tell an IPA drinker, even though I get the impression that the Pilsner is the moon landing or Everest to brewers and find beer aficionados. But if somebody says, oh, I just like IPAs, what would you tell them to get them to try a great craft Pilsner? I think, as Christian pointed out.
I would not tell them to drink a Pilsner, but I would say that when you have had 3 or 4 IPAs, you probably need something else. And that's where you start with a nice Pilsner. And I would say that you're really filling up. You're full with hobby flavors and all that, and you need this refreshment. And then you actually, that's what I do. I actually take a nice Pilsner because that's what my body tells me this is what I need. And I think that's where I would say maybe try this one.
I love that. Well, this was fantastic. You know, I always love talking to you guys. This is great. And I'm going to have to get now with Charlie Bamsforth, I think, back on the infusion question. But for our audience, I hope you enjoyed it. I really appreciate everybody joining. And I want to hear your thoughts on Pilsners. Why would you go to a Pilsner? Have you had a great craft Pilsner? Do you prefer infusion over decoction if you're so inclined and have that expertise? Please put that in the comments below, because I want to hear what you think, and maybe Jens and Christian will even weigh in on the comments. So also, I want you to check out these videos that are on the screen, because they have been selected just for you. So to everybody on the audience, cheers. Well, weren't those guys great? I just had so much fun. Alfredo, I had a great time exchanging some chat with you. You have some amazing perspective there. Wow, going back to the early Zymergy magazines. So anyway, like I said already, if you get a moment, it's great if you leave some chat. I'm going to be talking to Jens and Christian as we finalize a more edited version of our conversation. And coming up, I'll be talking to Charlie Papazian next week. And last weekend, I spent, or I was at Dogfish Head at the weekend of compelling ales. So I have several videos coming out for that. So anyway, everybody have a great day, and I hope you're drinking some delicious beer like I am. Cheers.